All right, I am so excited to take you on this trip. So let me give you a little background first before we get into some evidence today. All right, so in about 2016, I got to go to Munich, Germany with my husband. And when we were touring the city, I was walking down the street and I saw this advertisement and I did a double take and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Otzi the Iceman right in front of me on this gigantic kind of round billboard. And I, of course, had my husband take a picture, and I was not ashamed at all, even though people were walking by and wondering why I was so excited. And then, of course, my husband was like, whoa, guess we are going to the museum. And I dragged him there, and it was amazing. And I'm also not ashamed that I snuck my camera in and tried to videotape every single thing for you. So let's get going. How can an ancient crime scene teach us about the Stone Age? Explore the evidence and see for yourself. So, this has some primary source and secondary source information in it, as well as some video clips of me in the museum. All right, here I am at the Museum of Archaeology in Munich, Germany. They have a special exhibit today that I'm really excited about. They're featuring Otzi the Iceman. Here he is, right here. Come on in, let's take a look inside and see what more we can learn about Otzi. When did Otzi die? Let's take a look at this video. This is going to give us a timeline. How was Otzi discovered? Let's find out. So this is a video that I took of a video in the museum. And I don't think there's any audio on this one. So of course we know that Otzi was discovered by a couple hiking in the Italian Alps, also known as the Utzel Alps. So the video footage you're going to see is the rescue crew removing Otzi from the icy mountains, and at the time they didn't realize that he was from prehistoric times. So this is some helicopter footage from the day in 1991 when he was discovered. They fully removed the body from the ice. Of course, he's stiff and frozen. Here they are examining the tools that were found with him. Removing the body, I think they should be a little more careful. They don't even know yet how old the mummy is. Changed our knowledge of humans in the Copper Age forever. So Otzi was at the very, very end of the New Stone Age and technically started the Copper Age. Okay, so here's where we're going to get to some pictures that I took inside the museum that have some amazing information. Here's another picture of them doing some work, kind of looks like a biopsy, seeing everything they can find out about Otzi. So you might want to take a second and pause this, take some notes on Otzi. Why is he named Otzi? If you look at the red highlighted text, it kind of gives you a summary. I'm not going to read it all word for word, but you're welcome to pause the video and read it yourself. But we know he's named after the Utzel Alps. And what was special about him? He had perfectly preserved clothing, and his equipment was well preserved. We know what he looked like. We can figure out that he had brown eyes, dark hair, and that he was just about 5 feet tall. Was he a grandpa? What? It's impossible to say whether Otzi was a grandpa, but there's no doubt that he was among one of the oldest members of his community. Otzi's age was determined by means of a sample taken from his upper thigh bone. Our bone tissue is constantly remodeling, and thus the structure of bone changes characteristically with age. Otzi's bone tissue is similar to that of a 45-year-old person. For the copper age, this was quite an old age. So Otzi was about 45 years old. It is conceivable that Otzi was the oldest member of his village. And if you were inferring that he was important from his society, sounds like you were right. Let's see what else we can learn about Otzi. Let's go to some evidence maybe on about his physical health. Stone Age therapy. So you may have noticed in some of the other primary sources that Otzi had a bunch of tattoos. It says here that he was covered with about 60 tattoos. And in contrast to modern tattoos, they were not made with pinpricks, but rather with fine cuts, and they were located in areas where Otzi showed signs of wear, presumably with great pain. And if you looked at his body, some people were inferring that he maybe had some knee pain. Well, it says lumbar pain or lumbar in the spine, the right knee, the calves, the ankle joints, severing fine neutral fibers can help to relieve pain. Otzi's tattoos probably indicate a form of pain relief. Another purpose, however, cannot be ruled out. So those tattoos may just have been to relieve pain, but pretty clever. All right, Otzi's teeth. If you've seen the video where they look like they yank his tongue out, pretty gross. But Otzi's teeth provide information from his homeland. And from his early childhood, the enamel of your teeth absorbs and stores lead and oxygen isotopes, and so you can compare those. So, according to the results, Otzi came from South Tyrol. He spent his childhood somewhere in this valley. I'm not trying to pronounce all of that. But in the last years of his life, he probably was in another area. But his teeth reveal strong abrasions caused by eating gritty grains from stone mills. The pronounced wear on his incisors indicates Otzi also used his teeth as a tool. So he may have used his teeth to maybe cut rope or something. Troublesome companions, though. It said several small parasites were found. And don't worry, I'm going to get to show you some videos of a whipworm and he said he had deer louse flies or blood sucking parasites, and he had those on him. So just wait for that part. Otzi's teeth reveal information about his homeland. Here's an up close view for you.
Did you know that you can tell a lot about a person's life and death from their bones and teeth? Scientists were able to study Otzi's teeth to determine how old he was. The microscopic bone structure revealed Otzi's age at his death. Here I am in the museum, taking a look at some samples of human teeth. This is the lower jaw of a mature person. It would have been about the age of Otzi when he died. And this person had a lot of wear in his teeth. Pretty cool stuff, huh?
All right, let's take a look at his lifestyle. Let's see if this lets me zoom in. Medical investigations provided unique comparative data. This one is talking about he's a 5,000-year-old mummy, and they're taking samples, and people from all over the world have taken samples to different laboratories to study him so that they can learn about the Stone Age. What was his diet like? And we can assume, even from looking at his teeth, that he ate grains, meat. He even had plants in his intestines. It says here about 12 hours before meeting his death, Otzi had eaten meat and various plants consisting mainly of grains. Charcoal parasites were also found in his intestines. They showed that his meal had been cooked on an open fire. Interesting. At Otzi's time, grains were a staple food that were supplemented by other plants such as sloes, crab apples, mushrooms, berries, legumes. Other objects from Otzi's find complex included, I don't know what that is, hides, horns, bones, providing evidence of animal husbandry and hunting. Super interesting. Stone Age stress, however. Otzi had the typical signs of aging and stress. He had worn joints And unfortunately for him, and his intestines were infested with whipworm. One of his fingernails, which was found during a later excavation, showed that he suffered from chronic illness. He had an immune system issue, so he could have possibly been in some chronic pain for different reasons. And that kind of explains, of course, the tattoos that he used for pain relief. Who doesn't love some gross facts?
Okay, so here's kind of a gross fact. Scientists actually found some parasites living in, or that would have been living in Otzi's intestines. And parasites are basically blood-sucking, disgusting little creatures. Otzi had something called a whipworm in his intestinal tract, um, basically sucking in blood, pretty gross. He was also stricken with something called a deer louse fly. These typically land on animals, but this was found on Otzi's clothing, would have been trying to suck his blood. Here's a picture of a deer louse fly. And here's like tapeworms that can get inside of people's intestines and make them very ill. Pretty gross stuff. All right, here you have it, a human skull. You can also tell a lot about a person's life and death just from studying their skull. Yikes, there he is.
All right, Utzi's clothing and tools. And so we can learn a lot about Utzi's life from studying his clothing and the tools found with him. So Utzi was pretty fashionable for his time. He had clothes that were made specifically for the area where he lived. Of course, he had a knee-high coat made of goat hide, a stylish striped pattern. A bearskin hat protected him against wind and cold. He had goat hide leggings. He even had shoes that were constructed to undertake long journeys. And apparently, they were cut exactly right for his size. They were sewn carefully. So he obviously put a lot of effort into his clothing. He had it says a grass coat or mat. At the discovery site of the glacier mummy, three larger pieces of plaited alpine grass were recovered. These were first thought to constitute a cloak. No doubt has surfaced. It is more likely that it was a functional mat that could also be placed like a tent over his head. Interesting, to protect him from the rain. So, grass and straw mats were highly water repellent, so that's something that he could have used. And he also had kind of a trendy coat that had a striped pattern on it, which is pretty impressive for the Copper Age, which is, of course, right at the end of the New Stone Age. All right, Stone Age underwear? Seriously? What? Uchi's underwear is made out of especially fine leather, it says. And basically, it was fastened with a belt. However, the rear part was presumably exposed to a lot of sunlight and wind, therefore, it deteriorated. Was Uchi traveling barefoot? It says Uchi's shoes are the second oldest real shoes in the entire world. One right foot, he had one, it says here at the time he was recovered, the right shoe was still on the foot. Only the netting of the left one was preserved, which is kind of cool. And of course, he has a bearskin cap. And during subsequent expeditions, the headgear was later found where the head of the mummy had been lying. So they had to go back to the site where he was found, and they found some additional artifacts that belonged to Otzi. And so that's kind of cool. It says in the windy high mountain region, an effective head protection is especially important. What were Utzi's clothes and tools made of? So this video kind of gives you some details about where he would have got these resources from. Let me go back.
What kind of resources did Otzi use for his tools and his clothing? Here you see an illustration of Otzi the Iceman. Take a look at his clothing. You have to wonder, where did he get his ideas for what he's wearing? How did he use the natural resources around him? As you watch this video, we're going to break down his outfit piece by piece and learn how he used his natural surroundings to create his clothing to help him survive in these harsh conditions. This picture shows you all of the natural resources that Otzi would have had available to him during this time. And we can see different pictures of trees and animals. And these are all resources he would have used for his clothing and his tools. So, as you go throughout the rest of this video, I want you to pause at different times and read about the different articles of clothing or the different tools that he used these resources for.
So these are kind of like leg warmers for him. Here is the fur cap. You can also see the German language below. Tinder fungus. This is something you can see in the picture where he carried it in his belt. This is something he could have used to help him make fires. Arrowheads, you see how he would have carried those on his back? The 2 finished arrows have flint arrowheads. And of course, we know about the famous copper axe. It was his best piece. The copper axe is unique in being the only completely preserved axe from this time period. Here we have another belt that was sewn of leather, originally almost 2 meters long with pieces sewn together, forming a pouch. An awl, used for helping start fires and to drill, like kind of like a sewing kit. Here's his quiver, made out of the skin. I don't know how to say that. It had already been broken when Otzi was alive, apparently. Here's the dagger handle. Slats, looks kind of like a backpack. 2 narrow wooden slats made of latchwood attached to something. His inner shoes look like house slippers. And then maybe would have been stuffed with hay for insulation against the cold. And we have the arrow shafts that were found. And I think a lot of them were missing the arrowheads. 12 were unfinished. This one could have been fastened to his belt to hold maybe his dagger. These are birch bark vessels. Maybe he used them to help carry embers from them, can kind of carry fire from place to place. Interesting. Maple leaves. He wrapped pieces of charcoal and freshly packed maple leaves, which grew in the region between June. So that tells you he may have been found around June, or he may have been up in the mountains around June. He had a bow. It's pretty long. It was made from something called yew wood. It wasn't quite finished. It lacked a grip on it. Here's this grass mat, which could have been used as a cloak or could have also been something to protect him from the rain and make a tent out of it. You can see only pieces or shards of it remained. Maybe they think he would have had a coat. They have just pieces that are left, but they assume that it may have been a coat made of, can't tell, it looks like animal hide of some kind. Some impressive gear. All right, take an interactive look at Otzi's mummy. This was so cool.
All right, here I am with an interactive table of Otzi the Iceman. So you can see here at the base we have his mummy laid out, and you can move this cool display all around and click on different parts and see, learn about the mummy through this. So you can see, I can learn about his skin, the tissues, the muscles, but I like this about the bones. And as I move this box over the mummy, I can see that Otzi had back pain, he had a worn hip joint, he even had a missing pair of ribs. If I click on this button, it tells me why. Missing pair of ribs, Otzi's 12th pair of ribs is missing. Some people still have this variant today. It's no physical disadvantage. But as I was experiencing this table, I learned that Otzi had some actually very active lifestyle, which wore down his bones.
Here's some more pictures I took of this interactive table. It was so cool. You can see he had digested food, he had some gallstones, some unhealthy food, he had a full stomach. It's so amazing what we can find out from with modern technology. Here's another picture of this. Here's his femur. So cool. We have a worn hip joint there. We can see that probably would have caused him some pain. He had pronounced leg muscles. I'm guessing he did a lot of climbing because he's up in the mountains. Ooh, of course, we see the broken upper arm. He even had missing wisdom teeth. He had a broken nose, I'm guessing from the fall. Evidence of his health.
Okay, so was Otzi a healthy man? Well, he lived a really active lifestyle, which is really evident by studying his bones. Here I am getting ready to take a look into this microscope where I can take a look at some fragments of some human rib bones. It's pretty cool stuff. You can also see these are human bones down here. A lower leg bone, of a calf bone, and the other one is fractured on the right side. Scientists have discovered from studying Otzi's body that he had some rib fractures. Now, this is fairly common when studying archaeological findings of human bodies. You can tell that they had a rib fracture because where the bone was broken, it heals with a thicker layer of bone over top. However, it doesn't appear that Otzi's rib fractures actually hurt his life too much or affected his life too much.
Here's something of an Otzi's curse, or the Iceman, the curse of the mummy. There's a lot of superstition around mummies here. So, is there Otzi's curse? Otzi's curse was fueled by this media hype. Apparently, several people associated with the recovery of the mummy or with the scientific investigation of Otzi have died during the last several years by accident or illness. The tabloids connected these deaths to the curse of Otzi. Hundreds of people have worked on the Iceman project. Many years have passed since the discovery of Otzi, therefore, it's not surprising some of them are no longer alive. And then we will be studying Egyptian pharaohs, but there's this idea of the curse of the pharaohs. King Tut, who we'll be learning about, there were some people who, when they discovered that tomb, mysteriously died because they breathed in some mold fungus. So that's why the tabloids kind of hopped on that story, is maybe there's another curse associated with a mummy. All right, facts surrounding his death. We're getting closer to possibly the cause of death. Otzi's death. Is it a crime? Well, I think it's safe to say. Otzi died as a result of an arrow wound. And that's something you maybe have noticed from the x-ray that we saw. For a long time, the flint arrowhead remained undetected. It was first found in 2001. So that was 10 years after the body was found that they finally actually saw the arrowhead. And when new x-rays were analyzed, the arrow had been shot from behind and from a considerable distance. It penetrated the left shoulder blade, but was stopped short of the lung by soft tissue. The loss of blood was considerable. The injury was very painful, and the arm was probably paralyzed. The throes of death lasted only a few minutes. There was no trace of the culprit. So if he's shot in the back, I'm guessing somebody was after him. Why was Otzi shot? Otzi was obviously fleeing. This is indicated by the unfinished pieces of his equipment. Before his death, the man tried to quickly produce a new bow and several arrows. A deep cut in Otzi's right hand reveals that a close battle must have taken place immediately before his death. The reason for the ambush remains in the dark. A tribal war, a personal conflict, a robbery. None of his equipment, not even the copper axe, was stolen. Did it concern a herd of sheep or goats? Otzi was the victim of an altercation. There was some kind of conflict, but we still don't know exactly what it was for. I'll let you make your own inferences. And when did he die? So Otzi's equipment included 2 birch bark vessels. One of them he used to carry embers. He wrapped pieces of charcoal in freshly picked maple leaves, which grow in the region between June and September. So the pollen grains were found in the intestines of the mummy. So when they took the samples from his intestines, they found that type of pollen. So that's how they're able to know that's the months that he was in this region. Pollen grains are ingested indirectly with the food we eat or in the air we breathe. The hop hornbeam blooms in June. For this reason, Otzi's time of death is certain, early summer. So maybe it wasn't as snowy and cold up there, but early summer, we can now know that's the time period where he was in the Utzel Alps. Here's our last video.
We do know by studying Otzi's bones that he showed some signs of degeneration, meaning just getting old, and obviously a fairly tough lifestyle and climbing through the mountains. One thing is sure, though, he had a stab wound to his right hand. And it says here that it must have been affected a few days before his death. The stone arrowhead penetrating a great artery in his left shoulder was lethal. Heavy bleeding occurred, leading to a deadly shock and finally causing Utzi's death. So the stone arrowhead shot into his shoulder was lethal.
All right. This is kind of fun. Let's hear what my husband, Mr. Umphrey, has to think about Utzi's death. Let's see if it's similar to your idea.
All right, Mr. Umphrey, what's your final take on it?
Final take. Otzi was a bad guy. He did something really bad. That is why he fled to the highest peaks in the Austrian Alps, because he didn't think that the people that he committed the crime against would pursue him up there. So he ran to the highest part in the coldest part of the summer, up to the high peaks of the mountains, because he knew he could survive, but he didn't think his pursuers could. But his pursuers were determined to find him. Therefore, they got him. Shot him in the back. Otzi was a bad guy. Pays Prezi.
And they just didn't want his weapons or any of his valuable materials.
They didn't care. They just wanted revenge.
All right.
They just wanted revenge.
You heard it.
All right. That's all I have for you, folks. Get out of that awkward. All right. I hope you enjoyed your investigation into Otzi the Iceman. It was so much fun to go on this journey with you. Have a good day.